Good morning, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, dear ACT-SAF focal points, thank you very much for joining us today. It's a great pleasure to welcome you to this second episode of the ICAO ACT-SAF series. This is a technical training delivered under the ACT-SAF program and tailor-made for states who need to build knowledge on sustainable aviation fuels and cleaner energy. I'm very pleased to see you again in such high numbers. I can see the numbers growing on the screen in front of me, and this confirms the importance of SAF for aviation and perhaps also the interest raised by our first episode that we held at the end of last year. So my name is Neil Dixon. I'm Chief Environmental Standards here at ICAO, and I'm here with ICAO officers working on ACT-SAF and with the focal points and environment from the ICAO regional offices. Again, welcome to this second event. Now, 2022, as you all know, was a landmark year for ICAO states, and notably with the adoption of the historic agreement on the global long-term aspirational goal of net zero carbon emissions by 2050. Now, following on from that crucial agreement, 2023 therefore marks the start of the journey towards achieving the LTAG. And it promises to be just as eventful, interesting, and challenging. In particular, on the topic of SAF, LCAF, and cleaner energies, 2023 will be the year of the third Conference on Aviation and Alternative Fuels, or CAF3. And this will be held at the end of November this year. And it will aim to update the 2050 ICAO vision for SAF. Now, several key elements will pave the way towards CAF3, and we look forward to sharing more details with you soon. Now, all of this work will be carried out in synergy with the ACT-SAF program, which will continue to deliver assistance, capacity building, and training to states. Now, today's session, SAF Sustainability and Reporting under CORSIA, is the second of the series. Its objective is to provide you with a solid understanding of the SAF sustainability requirements, SAF sustainability certification under CORSIA, and of the reporting of eligible fuels under CORSIA. To deliver this training, we're very pleased to count on the expertise of three ACT-SAF partners, whose day-to-day core business is directly linked to SAF sustainability certification and SAF reporting under CORSIA. Now, our speakers today, and as I go through, I'll invite each one to switch on their camera, but they will introduce themselves properly later. Our speakers today will be Thomas Bock from ISCC, the International Sustainability and Carbon Certification, Carolina Grassi from RSB, the Roundtable on Sustainable Biomaterials, and Himanshu Ray Sharma from Verifavia. We're very grateful for your participation here today and for these ACT-SAF partners, and that you have volunteered to share your expertise and experience with states as part of the ACT-SAF series. For those of you also on the call, we'll be calling upon some of you to help us in future ACT-SAF training events, so watch out. So looking at the agenda for this second training, what will states learn about today? Well, the training will follow the following structure. We'll hear about the sustainability framework for CORSIA eligible fuels, the CORSIA sustainability certification process and the role of the SCS, feedstock certification, lifecycle emissions methodology, the traceability and chain of custody, the reporting of the use of CORSIA eligible fuels, the documents required for a SAF claim under CORSIA, and then, of course, arguably the most important bit, the open discussion and Q&As. We really want to hear from you and be able to answer all of your questions in today's session. Now, I wish to recall that the ACT-SAF series is tailor-made for you. We want to answer all these questions and bring you the knowledge that you need. This is why we encourage every participant to make today's training as interactive and collaborative as possible. Now, between each presentation, we will take the time for questions. You're most welcome to raise your hand and the dedicated Zoom button through the dedicated Zoom button and take the floor. Now, submitting questions in the chat is also encouraged, so please do that as well. I'll also insist that there are no prerequisites in terms of knowledge from participants. All questions are perfectly valid questions, so please ask away. Now, by the end of today's training, every participant can expect to have acquired valuable knowledge on SAF sustainability certification and reporting. And you'll also be able to share the knowledge within your organization and brief your colleagues on this subject. To this end, the training material, slides and recording, as we did with the first one, will be made available on the ACT-SAF platform. Now, the ACT-SAF platform, of which you can see a screenshot here, is the reference page for ACT-SAF. I invite you all to consult it regularly and to find all the latest news about the program and other initiatives, and stay aware of upcoming events and access to training material. Now, the ACT-SAF series will continue in the coming months with trainings on SAF technology and certification, market outlook and policies, SAF logistics, SAF economics and financing, and on training on how to, and a training on how to carry out feasibility studies. Make sure to keep an eye out for these trainings, which will usually take place at the end of each month, around a similar time to today. Now, I'll stop talking now, and before jumping into the training, it's my great pleasure to give the floor to Bruno Silva. He's our Sustainable Aviation Fuels Officer here at ICAO, and he'll give you a short update on ACT-SAF, and he'll also carry through and moderate the training from here on in. And with that, I wish you an excellent training to everyone. And Bruno, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Neil, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. So as Neil briefly mentioned here, we have all the updates on ACT-SAF are being put in our website. So we're happy to see that our list of partners is growing constantly. We're receiving many interest partners to receive support through ACT-SAF and also to provide support to our member states under ACT-SAF. And as you probably saw, we are also making available the materials for the ACT-SAF series in our website. So if you have missed the first series, I encourage you to take a look at the video and the PowerPoint presentation that is available on the website. And as you mentioned, we're all beyond the presentations, we're always happy to answer questions by email. Please contact us if you have any further questions or requests on regarding SAF. So the next slide, please. So here is the current plan that we have for the ACT-SAF series. So today we're having the second event on sustainability and reporting, and we already have the dates for the third and fourth events. Next month, we'll have an event focused on SAF technology and certification. So today, just to highlight here, today we'll be talking about sustainability certification, and next month we'll be talking about the technical certification, the chemical certification that needs to be done to ensure that the sustainable aviation fuel is safe to use in an aircraft. And today we'll be talking about sustainability. And then we'll have the series of events on number 4, we'll have a market outlook and policies, logistics later, and then economics and financing and feasibility assessment. And as we mentioned previously, all this is still subject to review. Feedback is very welcome. We have received feedback on these after the first event, which is very useful. And we, after today's training, please, if you have any feedback, let us know, and we'll be happy to consider it and adjust as needed. So with that, I think we can move to our agenda, and we'll start with this. So we've just done the opening and the recap of ACT-SAF, and now we'll move to these items here: sustainability framework for cross-eligible fuels, the sustainability certification process, and the role of the sustainability certification schemes, and feedstock certification. And for that, I'd like to invite Thomas to take the floor and go through these topics here.
Yes, thank you very much, Bruno. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone here. So here from IACC, reporting in live from Cologne in Germany. So we are located somewhere here next to the cathedral in Cologne. Some of you may have been there. Maybe just a super quick introduction IACC, of course, is a certification scheme. We're active in the energy markets, especially for fuels, but also in non-energy markets. So what we call industrial application, chemicals, for instance, but also in the food and the feed market. And we currently have about 7,000 companies certified in around 100, or a bit more than 100 countries. And of course, SAF is ever becoming more important here at IACC. So very happy to be invited to this event and to be able to contribute to some degree to today. Okay, so to start off with, I would like to briefly touch again on the sustainability framework for CORSIA eligible fuel, meaning also CORSIA eligible SAF. Next slide, please. So to recap a bit also from the very first session, there is a certain set of documents that ICAO has published that contain all the relevant requirements and guidelines, procedures for CORSIA eligible fuels. And they are part of the ICAO CORSIA implementation elements. As you can see here, these are the 5 documents that are, so to speak, the foundation for the work that we're doing under CORSIA. Next slide, please. And of course, very central in this regard are the CORSIA sustainability criteria, and they really cover all major themes. And I think it's important and valuable to highlight again that this really is the first global approach to such a set of sustainability criteria for any industry sector. Of course, in this case, for the aviation sector. You can see here we have 12 sustainability themes. Currently, we are in CORSIA's pilot phase until the end of the year. And during this pilot phase, the 2 first sustainability themes that you can see here in light green are applicable and are currently verified in practice. However, there's already an extended set of sustainability themes and criteria that have already been approved and that will find application starting with CORSIA's next phase, so starting next year in 2024. Next slide, please. So just briefly on the different themes, because you can divide those 12 themes up into 3 distinct sections. The themes that are currently already applicable for the production of CORSIA eligible fuels are the so-called carbon reduction themes. So for instance, we of course already want to make sure that any CORSIA eligible fuel generates lower carbon emissions than the fossil fuel counterpart. And at the same time, we also already, of course, want to ensure the protection of land with high carbon stock, because of course we want to avoid that any carbon that is released from these lands reduces or even completely negates the emissions benefits we have from CORSIA eligible fuels otherwise. Next slide, please. Then starting with next year, we have a whole set of environmental themes that will cover pretty much all of the major environmental themes that we have. So of course, that is water, that is soil health, that is air, quality and pollution, or avoiding pollution rather, that is the conservation topic, and of course the handling of waste and chemicals. So essentially we want to make sure that the production of SAF, including the whole value chain, does not in any case or to the best degree possible negatively affect these aspects here, or even in the best sense where possible, even enhance these qualities in the positive sense. Next slide, please. And then we, of course, also have socioeconomic themes. Those will also be applicable from 2024, so from next CORSIA's phase on, and will tackle important themes such as human and labor rights, land use rights, water use rights, local and social development, and importantly, food security. So this may be just as a quick recap from last session, and I think this is a good introduction to today's session. Next slide, please. Now let's dive a bit more into the actual sustainability certification process. So we know what we just saw are the sustainability themes and criteria, and how is that then applied on the ground, and what is the role of sustainability certification schemes, or in short, SCSs. Next slide, please. So of course, there's a whole lot of different things that sustainability certification can do, but I believe if we can sort of try and structure it, then there is essentially 3 distinct main pillars. So the first thing on the left-hand side, as you can see here, is we want to ensure sustainability in feedstock or raw material production. So of course, we need raw materials for SAF production. And really, no matter if we're talking about crops or if we're talking about certain wastes or residues, or looking into the future, even about renewable electricity from which you can make fuels or SAF in the future. For any of those raw materials, we want to make sure that they are cultivated or generated in alignment with the CORSIA sustainability criteria. And this is one part of the sustainability certification schemes. Then in the middle, what we of course also want is we want to be able to trace any sustainable material through the SAF value or supply chain. As we can imagine, SAF supply chains, as many different supply chains, can be long, they can be complex, they can be globally spanning. And we want to have some sort of system where we can track the flow of the sustainable material. And this can be done through sustainability certification schemes. Now, on the right-hand side, last but not least, we want to be sure that that SAF that is certified actually achieves a verified reduction of GHG or life cycle emissions compared to its fossil counterpart, which means that for each step in the supply chain, the CORSIA methodology will need to be applied so that at the end you have a verified, certified GHG emissions value and a certain GHG emissions saving of that SAF. Next slide, please. And of course, not just any certification scheme can start auditing and certifying CORSIA SAF tomorrow. There is a very stringent and set process that certification schemes have to go through. So ICAO, through its CORSIA documents, sets very clear requirements for certification schemes in terms of their documentation, their transparency, their reporting duties, how they have to monitor and review their system, how they have to incorporate the views of different stakeholders, how do they have to deal with complaints or grievances, and the requirements that they must set for economic operators in the supply chain. And all this has to be complied with by a certification scheme before they can be approved under CORSIA by the ICAO Council. Next slide, please. Currently, then, there's 2 certification schemes that have been approved for certifying CORSIA eligible fuels, and that is ISCC and RSB. And economic operators, since November 2020, when these 2 schemes were approved, can become certified under them to demonstrate that they are compliant with the CORSIA sustainability criteria. Next slide, please. So I wanted to briefly explain what can be called essentially a certification ecosystem. And this can be relatively confusing at times because there are so many different actors that do play and have a certain role here. If you look at the bottom here, you will see a simplified supply chain or SAF value chain, which on the left-hand side starts with feedstock generation. That may be a farm or plantation, for instance, then undergoes processing steps, is blended at some point, and then finally uplifted by the airline. And then, of course, at the top, we have ICAO, and ICAO has set in place the CORSIA scheme and all the framework conditions. And then in the middle, you have the SESs, so the certification schemes, currently ISCC and RSB. These certification schemes, they first, as we mentioned, have to apply to ICAO to become recognized. If they fulfill all the requirements that we have just seen on the previous slide, the ICAO Council can decide to approve them. And at the same time, of course, there's always a regular information exchange as well as reporting from the SESs to ICAO happening. And the SESs take the ICAO or the CORSIA requirements rather, implement them in their standard, and thereby set the certification requirements for all these operators you see here at the bottom. At the same time, all these companies here, have a reporting obligation to the SESs, and the SESs will use that data again to report to ACAO. Now, important to note here is that the SESs, they set the standard, they develop their scheme, of course, but they do not conduct the audits themselves. Instead, they are working together with what's called certification bodies that you can see here on the right-hand side. These certification bodies are those organizations that employ the actual auditors. So some names you may know, TÜV Nord, TÜV Süd, SGS, SCS, Control Union, all those different certification bodies. These certification bodies in turn are checked and accredited by so-called accreditation bodies, so national authorities, that is in essence look that the certification bodies work according to ISO standards. And then importantly and lastly, the certification bodies use the scheme that the SESs have developed and go to each of these different operators here and audit them. And if they are audited successfully, then you can see here that little certificates in that sense can be issued to each operator. And only if that operator is successfully certified can they handle, process, store, forward sustainable material. So by that, really only sustainable material according to the scheme's requirements can enter and be forwarded in the supply chain. Next slide, please. So how it actually works in terms of how do the CORSIA requirements go to application on the ground. To sort of showcase this, you can see here on the left-hand side, those are the 5 ICAO documents that are particularly relevant. And what's in there is essentially being translated by the SESs into their standard documents, which sometimes is called system documents. So the SESs will take the CORSIA requirements and will implement them in their own processes on the ground to make it applicable and practical for certification bodies and companies. And all these documents by the certification schemes are always publicly available on the SES's website. So if you would like to have a look, you're very welcome to do so on the SES's websites. Next slide, please. And then the next step is the SESs take the requirements from the system documents and essentially translate them into what it's called audit procedures or audit checklists. And these are absolutely essential because these documents here that you see on the right-hand side, these are used by the auditors during the audit. So these documents here, they essentially contain a very long list of questions in terms of the different CORSIA requirements. They also include verification guidance by the SES to the auditor, as well as evidence or documents that the auditor will need to check for each particular question. So for example, it may say, okay, so to substantiate this emissions reduction claim, please have a look at the company inventory system as well as the delivery document here, and what do they match? Is there any discrepancy? So the auditor will go through the questions that are relevant one by one and answer them. And only if the relevant questions are answered with yes, then this operator is compliant, and at the end of the audit, a certificate can be issued. Next slide, please. Very basic, how does this certification process actually look like? So if I'm a company, let's say a SAF producer that would like to become certified, the first step I generally have to do is to select a certification body, right? So one of the certification bodies that employs the auditors, and generally I can choose from different certification bodies that are approved under the CORSIA schemes. So there's not just one certification body that's available. Once that contract is in place, I, as the company, can become registered as so-called system user with the certification scheme. And then it depends a bit. Generally, as a company, of course, I will have to prepare my management system, the responsibilities of my employees. I will have to set up what's called a traceability system. I will have to calculate my emissions, and all that is, of course, relevant. At the same time, the certification body will do a risk assessment and establish a risk level for the audit. We'll already do upfront checks, and then is when the actual audit is conducted. Right, for the certification body, will check all the relevant documentation. They will do an on-site audit. They will conduct interviews, cross-check between not only documents, but also, of course, see with their own eyes what's actually happening on site. And let's assume that then the audit is successful. Then the certification body, so not us, not the certification scheme, but the certification body issues the certificate to the company. And then as a last step, the certification scheme publishes the certificate on their website. So for publicly, for authorities, for NGOs, for any third party to see. And we generally also include what's called a summary audit report, which will generally provide sort of aggregated information on the audit. And of course, that will only include non-confidential information that can be shared publicly. Next slide, please. Now, moving from just the general process, how that works, to the feedstock certification. So, of course, any sort of SAF that is produced will have to come from some sort of feedstock. And we want to ensure, as I mentioned at the beginning, that that feedstock is really generated or cultivated sustainably. Next slide, please. Generally, if we look at CORSIA, then SCSs cover all types of raw materials that are currently considered eligible for certification. So this includes different kinds of crops, so food and feed crops, but also energy crops, different kinds of residues that may be from processing steps or from agriculture or forestry, different kinds of wastes, as well as byproducts. All these can be made into SAF and, of course, have their own sustainability risks and will need to be certified accordingly. Next slide, please. So if we look at then, okay, how is this actually checked in each individual case? And if we look at the left-hand side, then what's clear is that for a crop, for instance, to be considered sustainable, they have to comply with the CORSIA sustainability criteria. So here, the auditor will generally do, for instance, a desk audit first, where they will check remote sensing tools. So they may check satellite imaging or certain databases, for instance, and they will see, okay, that farm that I'm about to audit, are they in some close proximity, or do they even overlap with some of the areas that we want to have protected under CORSIA? So, for instance, high carbon stock lands, or in the future, highly biodiverse lands. They will check that. Based and equipped with that knowledge, they will also, of course, do an on-site inspection, where they will do what we generally call in certification ground truthing, so substantiating what you have already seen during the desk audit. And of course, what's always super important is conduct interviews with personnel, because there you see an experienced auditor will generally check and note quite a lot. A similar process, although distinctly different though, is for waste or residues that enter the supply chain, because here it is extremely important that those waste or residues are really genuine waste or residues. We don't want any materials classified as such that have been intentionally contaminated maybe by an operator. So here, the auditor will generally do plausibility checks. So for instance, if we are talking about a restaurant, then the auditor may see, okay, what is the amount of virgin oil that this restaurant cooks with? And then what is the amount of used cooking oil that they transport to the next step in the supply chain? Does this actually make sense? And then, of course, on-site inspection, again, very important. And really any checks that help with identifying whether any product was intentionally contaminated or modified. Next slide, please. And then a specific case that we do believe, however, is very worth mentioning is what's called feedstocks with low risk for land use change or LUC. Of course, what we know is that we will need quite a lot of feedstock in the future to ramp up SAF production. If we want to have more SAF, we need to have adequate feedstock. At the same time, we want to have more feedstock while avoiding much of the negative effects that some of these feedstocks can have. And there we are looking especially for feedstocks that have a low risk for land use change. And this is considered by CORSIA in the CORSIA methodology. And on a high level, CORSIA recognizes two different approaches for producing these sort of feedstocks. You can see on the left-hand side, on the one hand, we have what's called the yield increase approach. This is essentially where a feedstock producer, so for instance, a farmer, can increase the amount of available feedstock out of a fixed area of land, so without expanding the land area. Or the unused land approach, where previously unused land is then used to then cultivate sustainable feedstock for SAF or CORSIA SAF production. And this concept that has been developed under CORSIA is translated by the SESs in specific guidance documents that are also publicly available and that can be used for certification of these feedstocks. Next slide, please. So if we look at what are these feedstocks actually, then of course the first thing that comes to mind are actually the wastes, residues, and byproducts. They are by definition feedstocks with low risk for land use change, and they're included on the ICAO positive list in one of the ICAO CORSIA documents. Then we have feedstocks, as I mentioned, that do not result in the expansion of global agricultural land for their production. The third one is feedstocks that were produced by any sort of innovative land management practices that led to the increase of these feedstocks, or the amount of these feedstocks. And then lastly, we have feedstocks that have significantly higher yields than terrestrial crops, which are, for instance, some of the algal feedstocks. Next one, please. And just to make this a bit more tangible in terms of explanation, some examples that we're speaking about here are improvement in agricultural practices. So for instance, in reducing soil erosion, decreasing pests that may be happening, trying to reduce any losses in the post-harvest time, or making use of what's called intercropping, where you combine two crops, so you grow them simultaneously, or what's called sequential cropping, where you plant several crops, but at different periods of the year. So essentially getting more feedstock without increasing land requirements. And with that being said, I believe it's time for the first round of questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Thomas, for that very clear presentation. And before we move to the questions, I'd just like to make one announcement here. If we can come back to slide 12. So when we had the ACT-SAF Series 1 back in November, so this slide was actually true because sustainability criteria for lower carbon aviation fuels were really under consideration by the Council. But I'm very happy to announce that this is not the case anymore because the Council approved it, these sustainability criteria. And now we have all these criteria. They're now also applicable to LCAF after the CORSIA pilot phase. And as part of this decision, the Council also included a new sustainability theme for sustainable aviation fuels, which is related to carbon permanence, to carbon sequestration and storage systems. So there is now a new theme that aims to ensure that any carbon reductions from CCS systems are permanent. So we'll be updating these before we publish the presentation on the website, and we of course will be working with RSB and ISCC to make sure that these Council decisions are considered in SES's work on the pilot after the pilot phase. So I'd like to let's continue the presentation then. So now we move to the topics 5 and 6, the CORSIA lifecycle emission methodology and the traceability and chain of custody. So again, I'd like to thank Thomas for a very clear presentation, and I'd like to hand it over to Carolina from RSB, who will cover these topics here.
Thank you, Bruno, and good day, everyone. So it's a pleasure to be here and be part of this ACT-SAF session and talk about the CORSIA certification. Thank you, Bruno. Thank you, Ricardo, and the ICAO team to invite RSB to be part of this excellent initiative. And also congratulations, Thomas, for the amazing presentation. So I'm Carolina Grass. I'm the Policy and Innovation Manager at RSB, and very quick about the RSB. So RSB is a collaborative multi-stakeholder network of industry and civil society leaders that working together in advancing the transition to a just and sustainable bioeconomy. So one of the roles of the RSB is the certification. So we develop standards according to policies such as CORSIA or as a voluntary scheme to ensure the sustainable production of fuels, chemicals, and feedstocks. So now talking about SAF, CORSIA, and carbon reductions. I think the first question that came to my mind when we talk about that is what is the potential of a specific SAF to reduce the carbon emissions and how we can calculate those emissions. So today I'm going to talk about the CORSIA lifecycle emissions methodology that will address these questions. And please, the next one. I think the first important point here is what data and SAF production steps should be included in the calculation of life cycle emission. What is the boundaries of the calculation? So here in this figure, you can see two different parts. In the left part, there is the land use change, and the right part is the core LCA. So the land use change means the process by which our activities, the human activities, the business activities transform the natural landscapes. And it could be direct, when the landscape is directly modified to produce a biomass, for instance, or indirect. That is the rippling effect that an increased demand for biofuels feedstock, for instance, a feedstock to produce SAF, can have on the global agribusiness. So, as a simple example, let's thinking that there is a food being produced in the region X, but now this region will be transformed for biofuel feedstock production, for SAF feedstock production. But we still need that the amount of food, so other lands and other regions might need to be converted to produce that food. So this is the definition of indirect land use change. And the other part of the life cycle assessment and is the core LCA, the core life cycle assessment, and it includes the production of feedstock until the combustion of fuel and in the aircraft engine. So the steps including feedstock cultivation, processing, extraction, the feedstock transport until the SAF production facility, then the conversion of this feedstock into the SAF, and then the SAF distribution until the blending point, and then the combustion of SAF in the aircraft engine. And saying that, so now we already know that to calculate the life cycle emissions, we need to consider land use change and core LCA. So saying that for CORSIA eligible fuel, a SAF producer must achieve GHG emission reductions of at least 10%, considering both ILUC our land use change plus core LCA. And it should be compared to the baseline. And the baseline for jet fuel is 89 grams of CO2 equivalent per megajoule, and for aviation gasoline is 95. So the next slide, please. And for the core LCA, the economic operator, and here the economic operator means feedstock producers or traders or blenders or SAF producer, can use both the default values that are provided by ICAO or calculate their own values using actual values. But for the iLook value, the operator must use the default values provided by ICAO, unless, of course, the iLook is considered as 0, and I will explain about that. I'll talk about that in the next slides. Regarding the DLook value, the direct land use change, it must be determined on the basis of context specifics. So consider regions, the conversions of landscapes, and of course, in line with the CORSIA methodology for land use change. So the next slide, please. And here I bring a simple example to make it clear and to demonstrate how we can calculate the life cycle emissions. And here we have two options, two different producers, but they are located in the same regions and using the same feedstock. So taking the two options for the first one, the core LCA, it's 25 grams of CO2 equivalent per megajoule, and the second one it's 45. Then we must to add the value correspond to the CORSIA iLook, that is the default value provided and published by ICAO. For the CORSIA eligible fuels. And then you can see here in the third line, the total of life cycle emissions for both options. So the next one, please. Then when we compare to the CORSIA baseline, we will see how much it was, how much GHG those producers are saving and how much carbon they are avoiding emitting. And then here you can see in the third table how we can split the savings for core LCA only and core LCA plus iLook. But here, what I'd like to highlight is that at the end, considering the emissions reductions for core LCA and iLook, the reductions for the producer number 1 is 28%. So it is a SAF that is eligible under CORSIA. And the second one is just 5.5%. So it's not eligible under CORSIA. So the next one, one more, please. Okay, thank you. So now we'll see when and how the economic operator can use the default values. The default values both for core, LCN, and iLook can be found in this document here that you can see. That is the CORSIA default life cycle emissions values for CORSIA eligible fuels. It is available at the ICAO CORSIA website. And in this document, please, the next one, you can find some examples of default values provided by ICAO. That this is these tables. I know that is difficult to read, but it's just to show to you that you can find these values published in this document. And for each value, you can find the specific region, the type of feedstock, and some specific specifications for the pathway to produce SAF. And one important point here is that if the default value for a specific road, region, or feedstock is not provided in this document, and the economic operator wants to certify its production process using this feedstock or region that is not specified here, they need to request to the CAPE, that is the Committee on Aviation Environmental Protection, the inclusion of this new data. But in order to do that, they need to meet some criteria. And the first criteria is that the pathway should be approved under ESTM, or at least have the phase 2 STM that is related to research report be reviewed and approved. The second criteria is that the pathway, the conversion process that is being developed by for SAF production must be validated and must have sufficient data and parameters to operating at commercial scale. And the third one is that the operator and the economic operator should provide sufficient data on feedstock production, on the conversion process, and the region of interest to produce the SAF for the ICAO and CORSIA team to perform the LCA calculation and ILUC model. So saying that, the next one is to continue about the use of default values. As I said, the operator can use the default values for GHG lifecycle emissions, both for CORSIA and ILUC, but their production process, feedstock, and regions should be the same described in that table that I have presented before. And the operator must indicate about it in the delivery documents of SAF. Please, the next one. So we saw the use of default values, and now we'll talk about how to calculate the life cycle emissions using the actual values, the values related to actual production. So, and here, the first and obvious points of this calculation, and the operator should follow the CORSIA GHG methodology, of course, and what it should include. So please, the next one. You can go ahead. Yes, thank you. So it should include the emissions generated during ongoing operational activities. And here I'm talking about fuel production facility, feedstock cultivation and extraction, transportation, and the upstream emissions related to the material and inputs needed for the operational activities. And here some examples are chemicals, electricity, natural gas used to produce electricity or steams, and so on. And the emissions generated during the one-time construction, I mean the construction of the facility or the production of some equipment, don't need to be included, don't need to be included in the life cycle emissions calculations. In terms of carbon emissions and carbon equivalent, so the functional unit considered for life cycle emissions, it's gram of CO2 equivalent per megajoule. And from the feedstock production, that is this first arrow here, to transport distribution until the blending point, we should consider CO2 equivalent emissions of methane, nitrous oxide, and non-biogenic CO2. For the combustion of fuel in the aircraft engine, only non-biogenic CO2 should be included in the calculation. So the next one, please. Okay. Okay. So we know that in many cases, in most of the process for SAF production, other co-products will also be produced. And these co-products may include other liquid fuels such as green diesel, or chemicals, or gases, or some waste could be used for animal feed. So how does the economic operator know the amount of carbon that should be allocated in each of the co-products? So in that case, we should use an energy allocation approach. What does it mean? The emissions burdens are allocated to the products, to the co-products, according to their contribution, in proportion to their contribution to the total energy content of the output. So we have the energy content of all the outputs, all the products, and then the carbon will be allocated according to the proportion of each co-products. So the next one. And now I will ask you to keeping the life cycle emission methodology that I have explained in mind, because now I will discuss the feedstock classification and see how it is linked with the life cycle emissions. So CORSIA classified the feedstock in 4 different groups. So the next one, please. The first one is the primary and co-products that are the main products of a production process. If you think about a sugarcane supply chain, the primary product will be the sugarcane juice, for instance. The next one. And then we have 3 different products. Yes, so the first one is the byproduct. Byproducts are secondary products with inelastic supply, but has an economic value. In this case, and one example is the beef tallow. The next one is residues. Residues are defined as a secondary material with inelastic supply, such as the byproduct, but with a low economic value. In this case, considering the sugarcane supply chain again, the sugarcane bagasse is classified as a residue. And finally, wastes. Wastes are materials with inelastic supply and no economic value. And one example here is the used cooking oil. So the next one. And why I asked you to keep the LCA requirements, the methodology in mind, because there are different approaches to calculate the life cycle emissions according to the type of feedstock. So here in this figure, you can see that for primary and co-products, we should include in the life cycle emissions calculation the land use. And of course, all of the data related to feedstock cultivation process and extraction and so on. But for waste, residue, and byproduct feedstock, we should considering zero the emissions related to feedstock production. So we add the land use change value will be 0 in this case. So the next one, please. And again, but just to emphasize, do remember that the operator must use the default values for iLook. And the default values are pre-approved and published by the ICAO cons, right? So, however, if a feedstock is classified as a low risk for iLook, I'm talking about those feedstock presented by Thomas, it can receive an iLook value of 0. And again, as I'm just talking now, waste, residues, or byproducts can also be assigned an iLook value of 0. And ICAO has a positive list that is not exhaustive for feedstocks that are classified as byproduct, waste, and residues. And I can show you in the next slide. So please, the next one here. So this is the positive list, and you can find this positive list in this document talking about the CORSIA methodology for calculating actual life cycle emissions values. And as I said, this list is not exhaustive, so it's possible to add new materials here. And to guide the economic operator in the classification of a material as a byproduct, waste, or residue, or a co-product, CORSIA has a decision tree. Please, the next one. As you can see here, this decision tree has some questions to guide the addition of new materials in the positive lists. So, of course, this assessment can be done by economic operator together with SCS and, of course, certification bodies and auditors. But for the inclusion of new material, it should be requested to the ICAO CORSIA team. So the next one, please. Now I'm talking about another important topic related to the sustainability of the supply chain, of the SAF supply chain, that's related to traceability and chain of custody. How we can ensure a robust and transparent chain of custody. So the first point here is to define what is the chain of custody. So the chain of custody is a process which inputs and outputs and all of the related information are transferred, are monitored and controlled over all of the steps in the SAF supply chain in this case. And then we have the chain of custody system, that is the system in place that all of the measures to implement a chain of custody include, and of course one of the most important things is the documentation of these measures. So the next one. The chain of custody has three main steps for tracking materials. So acquiring is the first one. So it's related to the acquisition of material. So to be distributed to airports and blending points. The next one is wrangling, how to wrangling the material. And the third one and the last one is forwarding the material. So all the steps should be well monitored and controlled, and all of the documentation related to these three steps should be recorded and transparent. And so the next one. And here is the example about how we transmit the sustainability information through the SAF supply chain or a specific supply chain. So since the farms where the biomass and the feedstock is produced, or since the point of origin where the waste, rest, or byproducts are collected, we need to have the documentation since the initial points of the supply chain. So self-declarations, proof of sustainability that contains information about the amount of the product, the GHG, the life cycle emissions, for instance, to bring informations of the place where it was produced or collected, the responsible, the number of the batch. So all of this information should be transmitted along of the supply chain. And then the airline at the end will be able to use all of this information to claim for the carbon reduction emissions. So the next one. So I think we can start with the questions.
with that, like, I'd like to thank you, Carolina, for the very clear presentation again. And I would like to move to our next speaker, Himanshu Sharma, who will talk about like reporting the use of course eligible fuels and the documents required for a SAF claim. So Himanshu, the floor is yours.
Hi. Thank you very much, Bruno. Can you just confirm if you can hear me? If I'm audible?
Loud and clear.
Yep. Thank you very much. Thank you. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I see the participation from all around the world. Thank you very much for your time today. I am Himanshu Rai Sharma. I am the SAF and Business Development Manager at Verifabia. We are an accredited independent verifier for GHG scheme for GHG emissions under various schemes such as CORSIA, EU ETS, UK ETS in terms of aviation, and also for airports under the airport carbon accreditation, and also the maritime industry. That's that's a brief information about me. Thank you very much to Carolina and Thomas for the detailed understanding of how SAF is actually being certified. Excuse me. Sorry. Yes, thank you very much to Carolina and Thomas for helping us understand how the sustainability process works. And now I will please allow me to present some simpler information that how an airline operator, how you can expect an airplane operator to report the use of CORSIA eligible fuels. Next slide, please. So today's agenda is an overview. First, we'll have how the reporting of SAF in CORSIA, how it's governed and what kind of specificities are associated with it. Then the updates to the emissions monitoring plan, what you can expect. And then a CORSIA eligible fuel, the CORSIA eligible fuel supplementary information template, and a list of documents required for a SAF claim as per our understanding, and some references from the SARPS Annex 16 Volume 4, so that in the future, if you want the official text reference, you know where to look for. Thank you very much. Next slide, please. So the reporting the use of SAF and claiming its emission reductions is governed by the document CORSIA SARPS and the Environmental Technical Manual. Similarly, as an airline operator is supposed to retain documents associated with emissions reporting for 10 years, all pertinent documents related to SAF should also be retained for at least 10 years. A proof of sustainability, which Carolina has discussed, must come from the sustainability certification schemes recognized by ICAO to claim emissions reductions. And the approved sustainability certification schemes, which Thomas also specified, are currently only ISCC and RSP. Then, along with the proof of sustainability, there should be a CORSIA eligible fuels supplementary information template, which needs to be filled and submitted to the verifier along with the emissions report for the independent verification. And based on which based on the supporting documents, we will audit the information in it and ensure that the claim is actually genuine. The airline operator should make the CORSIA eligible fuels claims on an annual basis to ensure that that all documentation is dealt with in a timely manner. So what that means is, in a compliance cycle, for example, in the pilot phase or the first phase, an operator is recommended to claim the CORSIA eligible fuels on an annual basis as they purchase and use it. However, the operator also has an option to decide when to make an CORSIA eligible fuel claim within a given compliance period for all CORSIA eligible fuel received by a blender within that compliance period. What that means is, they may choose to claim submit a claim within any time in the 3 years, but that can add additional documentational burden too. Because you may end up claiming the whole SAF CORSIA eligible fuels claim for 3 years at once, because overall your emissions reductions claim will be reduced from your actual offsetting requirement for a compliance cycle. For blending that occurs in the second half of the final year of a compliance period, the airplane operator and the state to which it's attributed should determine like if there is any flexibility in terms of submitting reports. So this is something I will, this is a very important point, and I will focus on this in my upcoming slides. Next slide, please. So how a procedure, like how the flow of this reporting of SAF in CORSIA works is first it starts with the intention to use SAF, and then the updates in the emissions monitoring plan with the SAF related procedures, followed by the submission and getting it approved by the Civil Aviation Authority or the state authorities. And then, of course, the procurement of SAF, then followed by collection of the sustainability documents from the fuel supplier or provider or producer, whoever they may that be. Based on the documentation collected, furnishing the CORSIA eligible fuel supplementary information template, and preparing your emissions report as they have been doing since 2019. And along with the emissions report, sending the CORSIA eligible fuel supplementary information template for verification, and after third-party verification, submission of emissions report, verification report, and CORSIA, the verified CORSIA eligible fuel supplementary information template to the state. Basically, it will add another document which will be submitted to a state authority by an operator and the verifier itself. Next slide, please. Yes. So updates to the emissions monitoring plan. As you may have noticed, there is no specific section in the emissions monitoring plan which refers to the CORSIA eligible fuels. And this is a common question, that which particular section can be updated, or where the operator is supposed to define its relevant procedures of handling CORSIA eligible fuels. We recommend that section 5, the data management part A, which is a very generic section where an operator has a very good opportunity to explain not just their data processing and controls of data quality, but CORSIA eligible fuels also, because that also somehow somewhat comes under data management. So if this section can be used by operators, airline operators, to describe the procedure of handling CORSIA eligible fuels. Next slide, please. Okay, now this is an insight of the CORSIA eligible fuel supplementary information template. I would like to take an opportunity in this presentation to go through this template. Maybe you must have seen it earlier, maybe not, but this it is a standard template, like an emissions report template available on the ICAO website. And we feel that going through it will actually help understand or maybe clarify any doubts about what kind of information is needed on each relevant section. So the first, it is an Excel template, and the first sheet is the airline operators information, and this is the information which is put there. Then you go on to the next slide, please. The CORSIA eligible fuels claim form. So for this form is one sheet such in the Excel template. And for each claim, and what that means is for each batch or for each transaction, there will be a claim, right? So based on the transaction, it depends on the number of claims will increase. And yes, you will need to replicate this. The operator will need to replicate this particular sheet in the claim form if there are more than one claims. So the claim starts with the purchase date, the identification of producer, who's the producer of the CORSIA eligible fuel, the basic details. Next slide, please. Following which the fuel production details, like what was the date of production of the neat CORSIA eligible fuel, the location of production, the batch identification number. This is a very vital information and comes in the proof of sustainability documents. mass of each batch of neat Corsia eligible fuel produced. Next slide, please. Then you have the details of your fuel type. So if it is corresponding to the jet A1 or jet to calculate the baseline and so life cycle emissions factors because, based on which, and the feedstock, the conversion process, all of this information should be actually provided at the time of purchase to the operator by the fuel supplier or the fuel producer. And then if there is a portion of batch which was purchased and not entire batch which was purchased, because a batch could have 100,000 liters or more than the required quantity, then how much percentage of batch was actually purchased, and the mass of that batch and the mass of neat Corsia eligible fuel in a particular claim. Next slide, please. The sustainability documentation, which is being provided along with the Corsia eligible fuel claim, which could be the proof of sustainability in this case, has to be specified here. And the life cycle emissions value, which Carolina has went through in very good detail in her previous presentation, that the operator or may choose to use the default or the actual LCA values. It's completely depending on them. And the source for the default values is available on IPO's website again. Next slide, please. Intermediate purchases. So the intermediate purchase, if the airline operator is not purchasing the SAF directly from the fuel producer, it needs to confirm that if there was another party, if there was any intermediate purchaser involved in between, and its details. So just to ensure that there's no double counting or double claiming of emissions. Next slide, please. Corsia eligible fuel shipper. So whoever the party, the details of the party responsible for transporting the Corsia eligible fuel to the blender or from the production facility. It could be the blending could be happening at the airport itself. Next slide, please. The details of the blender. So it basically, if you notice, I would like to stop here for a minute. If you notice, the details start from the production, from the purchase itself, and from the production to the blending to the intermediate purchasers. So it's actually following its whole value chain, so from each stakeholder where it's supposed to go. So at the end, this is why an airline operator is expected to have all of this information, because they must be knowing, they are expected to know where the SAF is actually coming from. So in this case, they should be knowing the name of the blender, location of blending of that particular SAF. Next, please. Next slide, please. The amount of the details of the neat Corsia eligible fuel received, the date, the mass, the blend ratio, the documentation, which could be a COA, that after the blending, what's the environmental attributes of that SAF, the blend ratio, and how much emission reduction and overall of that blended SAF is, and the mass of the neat eligible fuel being claimed. So as you can see, it's a very extensive form for each claim, and the good part is that it ensures that everything is accounted for, and there's no double claiming, or there's no opportunity of any errors. Next slide, please. And then, so this was the last slide was the end of one form. So there can be multiple forms according to the number of claims. And there is a summary slide, the summary sheet in the Excel file, where you can summarize all the number of claims and their total emission reduction being claimed for a particular reporting year. So I hope this gives you a very good good understanding. Now let me help you understand what I meant by the first point. Can you please go to the next slide, please? Documents required for a SAF claim. And the next one, yes. So as per SARPS, the ETM, these are the list of documents and some recommended from our end as well, which helps understand the SAF claim. So first is the process and the procedures related to the use of SAF are updated in the emission monitoring plan and approved, of course. A declaration from the airline operator who is claiming that if, for example, they are obligated to having an emissions obligation under multiple schemes, they need to provide a declaration in any case that these that they have not made the claim for the same batch under any of the other schemes which they are participating in. So that also is one of the ways to ensure that the SAF is not being claimed anywhere else. Another is the purchase records, the invoices, the sale records. If you have further sold the SAF onto any other third parties, then the sustainability credentials, which could be the proof of sustainability, which is one of the very important documents for your SAF, which actually proves that your SAF actually meets the sustainability criteria as per CORSIA. And the fuel uplift records or fuel slips. This is not mandatory, but of course it's recommended and good to have, so that it from an auditor's perspective, we recommend having it for ensuring that we can check that yes, how much SAF was actually uplifted. Now coming to, if you could please go back to the previous slides. Previous slides is the one where the reporting of SAF is there. Could you please go back to that? One of the initial slides. I'll just need one piece, previous, and one more behind. Another one, another one, and last one, please. Yes, this one. So for blending that occurs in the second half of the final year of the compliance period, the airline operator or state to which is attributed determine which flexibility is needed in terms of submitting reports. So the emissions reductions claim, if you're buying SAF which is blended in the later part of a compliance period, but is not being actually uplifted at that time or maybe used in the next year, so there can be an agreement between the state and the airline operator itself to decide where the SAF is actually, in which year the SAF can actually be accounted for the emission reductions claims. Because if you see from the list of documents, the CORSIA does not require you to actually identify flights where you have used SAF. So they need not be they need not be used on a CORSIA flight. It's not necessary. It's just that you need to provide a proof of purchase. You need to provide a proof of, and you also need not identify flights where SAF, state pairs where SAF was actually used. It's completely based on the proof of purchase and proof of uplift that yes, the SAF was actually purchased and delivered somewhere. To the last slide, please. The references to Annex. One more. So these are the references from Annex 16. As you see, this is the section 2.3.3, which says how the CORSIA eligible fuels are supposed to be reported. This is the exact same information as we have referred to in the initial of our presentation. As you can see, the appendix in the third point, there's an appendix 5, table A52. Next slide, please. This is the appendix 5, table A52, which is basically the appendix where each field of the CORSIA eligible fuel supplementary information template, it details what information is actually required in each section and how it's supposed to be filled. Next slide, please. So if you can see, each field is accounted for and detailed for your reference. Next slide. That's it. Any questions, please? And I think we can move on to a whole open discussion session, if not, overall, since we have a limited time left.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Himanshu. So for the next, and so thank you again for the speakers. Were great presentations, very clear, and thank you all for the participation of our partners here. Very good questions. So and already some food for thought for our next series. If we can go to the next slide here. So as a reminder again, so we have our next event is going to be in the 23rd of February, where we'll talk about SAF technology and certification. And this reminds me of one of the open questions that we had here on the chat about the hydrogen use in SAF production. I believe this is going to be a very good question for this session, because that's where we'll talk about the chemistry involved in SAF production. And I think we can hold this question for then. And please take a look at the other series of events here. And again, if you have any feedback and any suggestions, please let us know, and we'll be happy to consider these moving forward. Okay, with that, and again, if you have any open questions, we'll make available the presentation still in the coming days. If you have any follow-up questions to us, please feel free to contact us, and we'll be happy to take the questions offline. So with that, thank you very much, and see you in the next event then.